The fog lay heavy on Elkridge, Montana that morning. A bone-chilling dawn, the kind that crept into bones and thoughts alike. Frost slicked the iron rails, slicing through the train yard, muffling even the crunch of boots on gravel. It was the hour when most souls slept, but not Echo. Echo, 7 years old, limped across the porch of Clara Jensen's weathered cabin, nostrils twitching at something wrong in the air. He was a German shepherd, scarred, with tufts of fur singed from a long-ago explosion that had taken his handler and left him restless in civilian life. Most nights the firelight soothed him, but today his instincts screamed louder than the wind. Without warning, he slid off the porch and disappeared into the thick gray, leaving Clara's worried call hanging behind him. He moved awkwardly, but with purpose, following a scent only he understood. Past the old switch station, past the frozen pond where children sometimes skated, deeper into the shifting fog that wrapped the world in silence. Then, a train horn, a low, mournful howl, echoed somewhere far off. Echo picked up his pace, a desperate urgency pulling him onward. A shape appeared ahead, sprawled across the rails, half blanketed in snow, motionless. Echo stopped, hackles rising. He sniffed. Blood, rope, human fear. The form resolved into a man, face bruised, hands bound, breath shallow in the cold. Ben Carter, sheriff's deputy, known throughout Elkridge for his steady hand and iron sense of duty. Now, helpless, the train's light appeared, distant but growing, its metallic thunder rolling down the track. Echo barked, sharp, frantic, but the town was asleep, and Ben was out cold. The dog lunged forward, jaw clamping onto the rope at Ben's wrists, teeth scraping and tugging, his own body trembling with the effort. Each gnaw sent pain flashing through Echo's wounded leg, but he didn't pause. Ben's eyelids fluttered, and in the fog of semi-consciousness, he heard a low growl, the crunch of claws, the screech of steel, then the cold bite of teeth pulling at his jacket, dragging him inch by inch across the icy ground. The train was almost there now, headlight blazing, horn shrieking, wheels screaming as they chewed up the rail. Echo, muscles straining, dug in his paws and heaved with everything left in him. At the last possible instant, with a final wrench that ripped Ben clear of the track, the train hurtled past, a deafening, monstrous force, close enough that its slipstream knocked Echo off his feet and left Ben blinking in shock. Both lay gasping in the aftermath. Echo's flanks heaving, Ben coughing, alive but battered. Snow drifted down, covering blood and rope and fear, but not the pounding of their hearts. Echo whimpered, nudging Ben's face, eyes wide and unblinking. For a moment, all the horrors of the night, the violence, the cold, the confusion, faded. It was just a dog and a man, breathing together on the edge of disaster. But in that silence, one question clung like fog. Who had left Ben for dead, and why? The sound of the train faded into the distance, replaced by the far-off barking of a dog, the faint rattle of chains, and the hum of the town slowly waking to a new day. But the world had changed. Danger stalked the snowbound rails of Elkridge, and whatever darkness had tried to claim Ben Carter was still out there, watching, waiting. As Echo and Ben struggled to their feet, the sun began to slice through the mist, casting long shadows across the yard. Echo limped beside Ben, refusing to leave his side. Each step left a trail in the frost, a testament to survival, a silent promise of unfinished business. The early morning light caught on a bloodstain in the snow. Somewhere nearby, a door slammed. Echo turned, ears pricked, as if sensing someone lurking just beyond sight. Ben looked at the dog, steady, haunted, and nodded. Together, they took the first steps toward uncovering the truth. The train yard held its secrets close, but not forever. And Echo, despite the limp, despite the scars, had proven he was still a force to be reckoned with. Ben Carter owed his life to a retired K-9, and whatever reckoning lay ahead, they would face it as a team. The day had begun with the world on the edge of tragedy, and though it ended with breath and battered hope, the question, who left Ben for dead and why, remained, echoing between every steel rail and patch of shadow, unanswered, unforgiven. But not for long. It was Clara who found them. Echo and Deputy Ben Carter, slumped together in the blue half-light of early morning, snow swirling around their battered bodies at the edge of the train yard. Her breath caught when she spotted Echo's familiar silhouette beside the limp form of a man. She ran, coat flapping, boots kicking up icy shards. Clara's hands shook as she knelt beside Ben, brushing frost from his lashes, searching his face for any sign of recognition. Ben, it's Clara. Can you hear me?" Her voice was calm, but inside her chest, her heart thundered. Echo pressed his nose into her palm, trembling, a streak of blood painting his gray muzzle. The deputy's eyes fluttered open, confused, vacant. The air was thick with questions. How had Ben ended up here? Who could have done this? What if Echo hadn't found him in time? She wasted no time. Half lifting, half dragging, she and Echo maneuvered Ben toward her cabin, his weight almost too much for her thin frame. The world felt narrowed to the sound of Ben's staggered breathing, the click of Echo's nails, the hush of snow covering every trace of violence behind them. Inside the cabin, warmth rushed to meet them, pine logs crackling in the stove, the faint smell of coffee still lingering from earlier. Clara eased Ben onto the worn couch, then checked Echo's side. The dog's limp was worse. Fresh blood streaked the old scar on his flank. Ben, barely conscious, shivered uncontrollably. Clara worked fast. She cleaned Ben's cuts, wrapped a wool blanket around his shoulders, pressed a mug of tea into his hands. Echo refused to leave Ben's side, his head on the deputy's knee, gaze locked on the door as if daring the world to try again. Gradually, Ben's eyes cleared. He scanned the room, firelight flickering, faded photographs on the mantel, Clara's anxious silhouette moving in and out of view. "Where?" he started, but the words dissolved in his throat. Clara squeezed his shoulder, gentle but firm. "You're safe, Ben. You're at my place. Echo brought you back." Memories drifted through Ben's mind, jagged, incomplete. He remembered cold steel, rough hands, a girl's scream somewhere far away, the shriek of a train whistle echoing through the dark. Then nothing but weightlessness and pain. He tried to sit up, wincing at the bandages. On his shirt, fresh blood, distinct from his own, suggested a deeper story. Clara noticed, brow furrowing. She examined his shirt more closely, finding claw-like scratches, as if someone or something had tried to tear through the fabric. Echo shifted restlessly, whimpering, eyes darting to the window. Clara stroked his head, whispering, "You did good, boy. You saved him." But Echo's gaze remained haunted, searching for danger in every shadow. Just after sunrise, word spread through Elkridge like wildfire. Deputy Ben Carter, nearly killed, rescued by the town's retired K-9. In the corner cafe, hushed voices speculated. Was it connected to Amanda Griggs, the high school girl missing since December? Was it the same darkness that had taken others before her? Emily Jensen, Clara's sister, and at least 2 more women whose stories haunted the town. At the edge of the bed, Ben wrestled with guilt. He'd been tracking a pattern: disappearances, strange calls, broken clues leading nowhere. He remembered Amanda's last message, fear in her voice, a location by the tracks. He'd followed, confident, thinking he could stop the cycle. Now, helpless in Clara's cabin, he felt the cold bite of failure. Clara moved around the cabin with practiced care, tending wounds, pouring coffee, refusing to discuss her own grief. Only Echo seemed able to bridge the silent chasm between them. He nudged Clara's hand when her eyes grew glassy, settled at Ben's feet when memories overwhelmed him. The three of them, each broken in different ways, each carrying scars invisible to the outside world, shared a wordless understanding. The day dragged on, heavy with uncertainty. Ben's mind replayed what little he remembered: the icy warehouse, the glint of metal, a flash of movement in the fog, the scream. He could not recall faces, only shadows. Every sound outside, the snap of a twig, the creak of snow-laden branches, sent echo to the window, ears pricked, body tense. By late afternoon, Sheriff Hoyt stopped by, boots tracking in slush, face drawn with worry. "Ben, you gotta take it easy. Folks are scared. Amanda's parents—" He stopped, glancing at Clara, then at the dog. "They're saying it's all connected. They want answers, Ben." Ben nodded, jaw tight. "I need to remember. I was close. I felt it." Sheriff Hoyt's voice dropped. "There's more. We found tire tracks out by the warehouse. Looked fresh. Same place Amanda's phone pinged last." Clara stiffened. "Warehouse by the switchyard?" "Yeah." Hoyt met her eyes. "And something else. Found this caught in the fence." He held out a girl's scarf, faded red, knotted at one end. Clara's hands shook as she took it, recognizing it instantly. It had belonged to Amanda. Echo stood, tail stiff, nose to the fabric. He whined deep in his throat, then barked, sharp, insistent, toward the door. "Let's go," Ben said, struggling to his feet, adrenaline rising. "Now." The sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the snow with purple shadows. As they prepared to leave, Clara pressed the scarf to her chest, silent tears tracing her cheeks. Echo nudged her leg, gaze steady, grounding her in the moment. Before stepping into the night, Ben paused in the doorway, eyes locked on Clara. "This isn't just another case, is it?" His voice was raw, threaded with regret. Clara shook her head, voice trembling. "No, not for any of us." They stepped into the bitter cold together, bound by loss, driven by a hope that somewhere in the darkness, answers waited to be found. Behind them, the warmth of the cabin faded, replaced by the electric tension of the unknown. Shadows pooled around the abandoned train yard, and with each step, the question grew heavier. Is this all connected to the missing women, or was something even darker waiting in the snow? Snow clung to the window glass of Clara's cabin as night settled across Elkridge, shrouding the town in a hush broken only by the pop and crackle of the fire. Ben Carter lay propped on the couch, his wounds bandaged but his mind restless, thoughts twisting through memories that refused to line up. The train yard, the rope, Amanda's scarf, each detail came in flashes, then vanished into a void edged with guilt. Echo curled at Ben's feet, body drawn tight as a bowstring. Each time Ben shifted, the dog's ears flicked and he adjusted position, as if keeping watch for dangers only he could sense. His limp was more pronounced now, but his devotion was a steady weight, a silent promise that no threat would go unnoticed. The embers in the stove pulsed red, casting long shadows across Echo's scarred flank. Clara moved quietly around the room, tending to small tasks, refilling Ben's mug, adding logs to the fire, checking Echo's old wound. She paused sometimes by the window, staring out into the dark where the woods pressed close, her profile outlined in gold. The world outside was full of secrets, missing girls, unsolved crimes, rumors whispered between neighbors and hidden in the wind. But here, inside, everything slowed. Grief was not a flood, but a low, persistent tide. Ben watched Clara as she worked, his chest tightening at her quiet resilience. He recognized it, a familiar armor forged in the long hours after a loss, when words were useless and only actions could steady the shaking inside. He saw how her hands sometimes lingered over her sister Emily's photograph on the mantel, thumb brushing the glass with a tenderness that broke something in him. Echo whined softly, shifting to look at Ben. Ben tried to smile, his lips rough with fatigue. "You saved my life, partner." His voice trailed off, shame blooming across his features. He looked away, jaw clenched. Clara knelt beside Echo, running her fingers behind his ears. "He's got a knack for being in the right place, even when the world isn't." Ben took a shaky breath. "I was supposed to protect them, Amanda, Emily, all those women. I followed the signs, but I wasn't fast enough. I keep seeing their faces." Clara sat back on her heels, searching Ben's eyes. "You're only human, Ben. The ones who hurt them, they're the monsters, not you." He studied the ceiling, fists pressed to his knees. "I don't even know how I ended up on those tracks. Just a scream, a fight, then nothing. It's like someone reached into my head and tore out the pieces that matter." Clara handed him a mug. The warmth seeped into his palms, grounding him. "You're still here. That counts for something." Echo made sure of it. She managed a small smile. "If you ask me, the three of us, broken as we are, we might be the only ones stubborn enough to fix this." They sat in companionable silence, broken only by Echo's contented sigh and the distant moan of wind against the eaves. Ben's gaze drifted to the map tacked above the mantel. Red pins marked the places where women had vanished. The frozen lot behind the cafe, the dirt road by the grain silo, the shadowed alleys behind the old switchyard. Patterns, clues, dead ends. His thoughts circled back to Amanda's last known location, the abandoned warehouse by the tracks. "I need to go back," he said quietly. "I think I missed something." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "I'll go with you. Someone has to make sure you don't end up on those tracks again." She tried for lightness, but her voice wavered. Echo's head snapped up at the word go, tail thumping once. He tried to stand, favoring his wounded leg, but refused to be left behind. Ben looked at Clara, a new resolve simmering behind his exhaustion. "You said your sister Emily disappeared out by the rail tunnels?" Clara nodded, her lips pressed tight. "I never believed she just ran away. She left her dog, her favorite book, everything. It's like she was swallowed whole." Ben felt the pain in her words, raw and open. "I'll find her," he said, voice steady despite his doubt. "We'll find her. And Amanda too." For a moment, Clara's eyes glistened with gratitude and sorrow, but she didn't look away. Echo stepped closer, nudging his head beneath Ben's hand, a warm pressure that eased the ache in his chest. The three formed a strange kind of family, bound not by blood, but by the wounds they carried and the hope that somehow, together, they might heal. Night deepened. Outside, the wind rattled loose shingles, and somewhere a distant train wailed, a sound both mournful and promising. Ben forced himself up, ignoring the protest in his ribs. "Let's make a plan. Tomorrow we go to the warehouse, no more waiting." Clara agreed, her voice stronger now. Tomorrow. Echo let out a low, eager bark, tail flicking with anticipation. The fire snapped, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. For the first time in a long while, Ben let himself imagine a world where justice might outweigh regret, where the broken might lead the way back to wholeness. They sat a little closer as the night wore on, sharing stories of Emily's kindness, Amanda's laughter, Echo's bravery. Ben spoke about the cases that had gone cold, the feeling of being haunted by the ones he couldn't save. Clara confessed her worst fear, that Emily was out there somewhere, still waiting. Before dawn, sleep finally claimed them. Echo, ever watchful, settled himself between Ben and Clara, ears twitching in his dreams. The world outside remained cold and uncertain, but inside the cabin, something had shifted. A seed of resolve, a fragile thread of hope. As morning crept across the snow, painting the window with pale gold, the three unlikely allies prepared to chase the darkness back to its source. The warehouse squatted at the edge of Elkridge, flanked by the endless ribbon of tracks and shadowed by snow-crusted pines. Rust chewed the corrugated metal walls. Its windows, filmed with grime, glinted like the eyes of something that preferred the dark. Ben, Clara, and Echo stood outside just after sunrise, breath clouding in the brittle air, steeling themselves for what lay inside. Clara's gloved hand trembled as she unlocked the chain on the side door. "No one's been in here since the last fire inspection," she whispered. Ben nodded, jaw tight, scanning for any sign they weren't alone. Echo pressed ahead, nose low, tail flicking warily. The air inside was thick, sour with mold, the metallic tang of old blood, and something that stung memory more than nostrils. Their footsteps echoed as they moved deeper, flashlight beams trembling across sagging pallets, crates marked with numbers that meant nothing. The only sound was the hum of the wind slipping through broken glass and Echo's claws ticking on the concrete. Near the back, Echo froze, hackles up. He led them to a battered steel door half hidden by debris. Ben's heart pounded. He drew his sidearm but kept it low, motioning Clara to stay behind. Echo nudged the door. It groaned open, revealing narrow stairs spiraling into the gloom. They descended, each step an act of faith. The basement air was colder, dense with secrets. Echo's nose twitched furiously. He pulled them to a far corner where the darkness pressed hardest. There, hidden behind a tarp, was a makeshift cage, iron bars welded into a crude cell, its floor stained dark and sticky. Clara sucked in a ragged breath. "Oh God." Her voice broke as she stumbled back, hands shaking. Ben moved closer, knelt, and found Amanda's earring caught on a wire. He held it up, the tiny blue stone flashing in the beam of his light. Proof. Amanda had been here. The details were unbearable. Claw marks on the bars, a strip of floral fabric torn and balled in the corner, and, mounted high in the rafters, a security camera. Red light dead, but the memory card still inside. Echo pawed at a scuffed patch of floor, exposing a streak of fresh blood. He sniffed, then looked at Ben with mournful certainty. Ben's anger surged. They kept them here, like animals. His hands shook as he inspected the bars, jaw clamped tight. Clara reached out, her fingers brushing a faded scarf half buried in sawdust. She pressed it to her lips, stifling a sob. "Emily's," she managed, voice thin as tissue. "She wore this to my birthday. I thought she lost it in the woods." The three of them stood together, suspended in grief and horror, their breaths mingling in the freezing air. Ben pushed himself up, fighting the urge to punch the wall. "We have evidence," The camera, Amanda's earring, Emily's scarf. Maybe, he choked off the hope in his own words. Clara took the camera, her hands suddenly steady. We'll find out who came and went. If Emily was here, if Amanda, maybe they're still alive. Her resolve cut through the despair. Ben nodded, swallowing hard. They searched the rest of the basement, finding a ledger tucked inside a toolbox. Names, dates, numbers. Ben recognized some of the names. Ernest Doyle, a former rail worker, jumped out. Doyle was known for his temper and for wandering the train yard at odd hours. There were other names, too, some familiar, some with only first initials, all coded, all ominous. Echo snuffled the ledger, then suddenly stiffened. He barked at the back wall, his tail ramrod straight. Ben knelt, pressing his ear to the bricks. A faint metallic clink. Pipes, maybe, or someone moving on the other side. He tapped gently, then pulled back. Nothing. They followed Echo's nose into an adjoining tunnel, part of the old freight system now used only by scavenging raccoons and, apparently, darker things. The corridor was tight and the air heavy. At the end, they found a pile of burnt rags, a cheap burner phone, and a shoe, Amanda's, her name written inside in fading Sharpie. The world seemed to spin around Clara as she knelt beside the shoe. She was so close. All this time she was right here. Ben placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're closer than ever, Clara. We have proof now. This is the break we needed. Echo nudged the phone, tail low, as if trying to will the device back to life. Ben pocketed it, along with the camera and ledger. We'll take this to Hoyt. If Doyle's involved, he's not working alone. There's a network here, bigger than just one man. Clara wiped her face with the back of her sleeve, fire returning to her eyes. We find them all, not just for Emily or Amanda, for every girl they took. They made their way back through the maze of crates, Ben's flashlight flickering as the batteries faded. Echo kept glancing back, as if sensing ghosts clinging to the walls. Just before reaching the exit, Ben paused, looking at Clara. You trust me? She met his gaze, grief and hope mingling in the line of her jaw, and nodded. As the first hints of dawn seeped through the cracks, the three emerged into the cold with evidence in hand and a terrible new knowledge. The evil haunting Elkridge ran deep, and the darkness was closer than any of them wanted to believe. For the first time, the question wasn't just whether the missing women could be found, but whether Ben and Clara could trust anyone in this town at all. The world outside the warehouse was unchanged, snow falling steady, the whistle of a distant train. But inside each of them, something had shifted. The truth was now a living thing, clawing its way into daylight. And as Echo limped beside them, eyes never leaving the shadows, it was clear. The hunt was only just beginning. The snow kept falling, muffling Elkridge in a hush that felt more ominous with each passing hour. After the warehouse, Ben and Clara returned to the cabin, their hands full of evidence and their hearts heavier than before. Ben barely rested. His mind churned with possibilities, piecing together patterns that had haunted him for months. Clara, her grief now sharpened into determination, spent the night reviewing the camera footage, desperate for a glimpse of Emily or Amanda, for anything that would break the silence. By morning, a bitter wind rattled the windows. Ben leaned over a worn map, tracing lines between the train yard, the warehouse, and a cluster of old storage sheds behind the abandoned switch station. Doyle, he muttered, tapping the name scrawled in the ledger. Ernest Doyle's always around the rails, always angry, and now... He paused, considering the list of belongings they'd found. We have enough to bring him in, but he's not working alone. Clara set the camera on the table, her hands steady now. Let's get answers, she said. Echo lifted his head from the rug, ears flicking. The scars across his muzzle looked especially stark in the morning light, a reminder that he'd survived worse and would face whatever came next. Ben called Sheriff Hoyt, his voice clipped and urgent. I need you to pull Doyle's employment records and run those names in the ledger. I'm headed to the switch station. Don't send backup unless I call. Hoyt hesitated on the other end. You sure, Ben? After what happened? I'm sure, Ben said, snapping the phone shut. He holstered his weapon, shrugged on his battered coat, and nodded at Clara. I'll go in first. Stay back until I signal. They drove out together, the truck rattling along icy roads lined with skeletal trees. Clara watched the world blur past, hands clenched around the scarf she'd found in the warehouse. What if this is bigger than we think? She whispered. Ben glanced over, voice soft but steady. Then we finish it. The switch station was a squat, cinder-block building choked by weeds and half buried in drifts. Ben slipped inside, flashlight sweeping across the darkness, every sense sharp. The place reeked of oil and old cigarettes. In the back, he heard voices. Doyle's, unmistakable, gruff and defensive. Echo, meanwhile, caught a scent by the sheds. Clara followed, heart pounding. The air was sharp with metal and fear. Echo pressed his nose to a rotted wooden door, pawing insistently. Clara knelt, easing the door open. Inside, beneath coils of cable and tarps, was a hidden compartment. She pulled back the tarp and gasped. Piled neatly were women's belongings, scarves, earrings, notebooks, and a small photo of Emily, folded and creased. Tears blurred Clara's vision as she gathered the items, hands shaking. Echo stood guard at the door, his body tense, muscles quivering as he listened for footsteps. Back in the switch station, Ben confronted Doyle. You know why I'm here, Ben said, voice calm but edged with steel. Doyle spat at the ground, eyes wild. You got nothing on me, Carter. You don't know what you're messing with. Ben stepped closer, blocking the exit. We found your ledger. We found Amanda's earring. Emily Jensen's scarf. Want to talk now? Doyle's jaw clenched, and suddenly he lunged, fist swinging, knocking Ben hard against a row of lockers. The world spun. Ben tasted blood, but fought back, grappling with the older man. Doyle was strong, desperation lending him the violence of a cornered animal. They crashed into metal, Doyle snarling, Ben struggling to stay on his feet. Echo, sensing the danger, charged in from the shed. Clara's cry followed. Ben! But the dog was already moving, limping but relentless. Echo launched at Doyle, teeth bared, pinning the man to the ground with a snarl. Ben, gasping, wrestled Doyle's arm behind his back and snapped on the cuffs. The fight left the room echoing with the ragged sound of breathing and the stench of adrenaline. Clara arrived, clutching the photo, her fear dissolving into relief as she saw Ben upright. She knelt beside Echo, running her hands through his fur. Good boy, she whispered, voice breaking. Ben dragged Doyle to his feet, staring him down. Who else is involved? Who's Halverson? The name had been scribbled in the ledger. Daniel Halverson, a local rail magnate with deep pockets and deeper secrets. Doyle sneered. You'll never stop it. Halverson owns this town. Ben shoved him toward the door. We'll see about that. The sheriff's cruiser arrived minutes later. Hoyt and 2 deputies took Doyle away, reading him his rights. Ben handed over the evidence. Ledger, camera, phone, belongings. watching as it all disappeared into evidence bags. Hoyt clapped him on the shoulder. "Nice work, Ben, but this doesn't end with Doyle, does it?" "No," Ben said, eyes following the receding taillights. "It's just getting started." As dusk fell, Ben, Clara, and Echo stood together in the empty yard, snow swirling around them. Clara tucked Emily's photo into her coat, her resolve fierce. "We have to go after Halverson. He's the one moving the pieces." Ben nodded, determination hardening his features. Echo, head low but eyes bright, pressed close between them, a silent shadow still ready to follow every trail. For the first time since the nightmare began, hope flared in the cold Montana night. But with it came the chilling certainty that the most powerful enemy had not yet shown his face, and the next move could cost them everything. A hard wind swept across Elkridge the next morning, rattling the eaves of Clara's cabin and painting the sky with cold, washed-out sunlight. Ben Carter barely slept, pacing the cabin as evidence mounted in his mind. A network of missing women, clues pointing to Halverson, and the memory of Doyle's last words echoing, "You'll never stop it." Clara sat at the table, laptop open, the warehouse camera footage queued up. She clicked through hour after hour of grainy nighttime images, shadows moving in and out, figures loading and unloading boxes, glimpses of faces half lit by passing train headlights. Echo, ever alert, watched the screen with his head cocked, ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound. Ben hovered at her shoulder. "Anything?" he asked, voice ragged with exhaustion and hope. Clara shook her head, scrubbing back and forth on the timeline. "Nothing useful so far. Mostly just shadows. Wait, go back. Right there." She paused the video as a figure passed near the cage. The resolution was poor, but there was something unmistakable in the shape, the long braid, the defiant tilt of her chin. Ben squinted. "Is that—" Clara's breath caught. "Emily." Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but in it was a storm. Relief, agony, determination. She leaned in, eyes wet, watching her younger sister move across the screen, hands bound but alive, heartbroken but unbroken. Echo pressed his nose to the monitor, whining, pawing softly at Emily's frozen image. Clara blinked back tears, brushing her fingers across the screen. "She was here just months ago. She's alive, Ben. I know it." Ben reached out, steadying Clara's shaking hands. "We're not letting this go. Not now. Not ever." His own voice trembled. The case suddenly more than just professional. It was personal, a promise etched into every scar he carried. Clara gathered herself, drawing in a deep, shuddering breath. "I'm going to keep searching through every minute of this footage. There has to be more. A clue. Something about where they took her next." Ben nodded. "I'll talk to Hoyt. See if anyone remembers seeing Halverson out at the yards. If Doyle was working for him, there must be records, payments, calls, something we can track." Echo, restless, paced the room, finally settling at Clara's feet. He watched her intently, as if willing her courage into the flickering images on the screen. The next hour was a blur of phone calls and hushed urgency. Sheriff Hoyt agreed to subpoena Halverson's financials and security logs. Ben jotted down notes, a web of names and dates snaking across his notepad, each connection a lifeline to someone still missing. At noon, Clara let out a gasp. "Ben, look." She pointed to the screen. The camera caught a clear shot of a black SUV, license plate barely visible. A man in a dark coat, broad-shouldered, helped a girl, Emily, into the vehicle, while another watched from the shadows. Ben froze, recognizing the second man's silhouette from town meetings and old photographs. "That's Halverson," he said, anger burning behind his eyes. Clara's hands shook, but her voice was iron. "We have proof, and now we have a target." Ben looked at her, seeing not just grief, but a fierce, warm, desperate hope. He understood it. He'd seen it in the mirror after every failure, every time he'd told a family he hadn't found their loved one. Now, with Clara's hope fueling his own, he made a promise. "We're going to bring her home. Both of them. All of them." Echo thumped his tail, gaze bright, as if sensing the shift in purpose. He nosed at Ben's jacket, urging him toward the door. Before leaving, Clara paused, hand on Ben's arm. "I know this isn't just about my sister anymore. You're carrying all of them, their stories, their families. Don't let it break you." Her words were quiet, but fierce. Ben managed a weak smile. "I won't. Not if you're with me." They loaded into Ben's truck, Echo wedged between them, alert and anxious. As they drove through Elkridge, the town seemed different, more awake, more suspicious. Faces pressed to frosted windows, whispers trailing as they passed. People had seen too much loss, too many open endings. The news of Doyle's arrest had spread, but fear still haunted every corner. At the sheriff's office, Ben showed Hoyt the footage. The older man's face darkened as he watched Emily on the screen. "We'll put out a bolo on that SUV. I'll talk to the judge about a warrant for Halverson's property." Ben leaned in, voice low. "He's not going to run. He thinks he owns the law out here. That's his mistake." Echo bristled at the tension, growling low when an unfamiliar deputy entered the room. Clara knelt to comfort him, her hand steady now. "He knows something's about to break. We need to be ready." Hoyt nodded, clapping Ben on the back. "You're not alone, Carter. Whatever's coming, we're all in." The day stretched long and taut, the air crackling with anticipation and dread. Clara spent every spare moment poring over footage and files. Ben worked his contacts, mapping out Halverson's properties, piecing together the trafficking ring's movements. Echo, for his part, stood sentinel, watching windows, sniffing the wind, always searching for danger or hope. As dusk bled into night, Ben and Clara sat side by side on the porch, shoulders nearly touching. "You ever wonder," Clara said, staring into the dark, "if anyone will ever really feel safe here again?" Ben was silent for a long moment. Then, "Maybe not. But tonight, for the first time, it feels like we're not just chasing ghosts anymore. We're chasing the people who made them." Echo rested his head on Clara's knee, sighing. The cold seemed a little less sharp. Inside, the screen flickered with the last image of Emily, eyes bright, spirit unbroken, waiting for a rescue that now felt possible. The air in Elkridge vibrated with urgency that night, an undercurrent in every hurried step, every shadow crossing the frosted streets. Ben Carter could feel it in his bones as he buttoned his coat and loaded his service pistol, mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Clara moved around the cabin in silence, packing a bag with medical supplies, extra batteries, bottles of water. Her movements were precise, her jaw set. Echo watched them both, tail flicking, eyes burning with purpose. Outside, the moon painted the snow a bruised blue. It was just past midnight when Clara's phone buzzed, a message from an anonymous number, the kind Ben had seen before in old cases. "Tunnels, tonight. They're moving them." No signature, no details, but enough to make the blood in Ben's veins run cold. They didn't hesitate. Ben called Hoyt with the tip, his voice low and urgent, and the sheriff promised backup at the edge of the woods. Then Ben, Clara, and Echo slipped out into the night, hearts pounding, every sense sharpened by fear and hope. The old tunnel system ran beneath the train yard and out toward the abandoned miner's cabin in the forest. Miles of forgotten darkness where secrets could fester. Echo led the way, nose low, pulling them through snowdrifts and dead brush, pausing only to scan the horizon or listen for footsteps behind them. He was in his element now, part guardian, part hunter, his limp barely slowing him as he pressed onward. As they neared the first tunnel entrance, Ben signaled for silence. He and Clara crept forward, Echo at their side. The tunnel mouth yawned open, breath clouding the air with the scent of old coal and rot. A faint glimmer of flashlight beams flickered in the blackness ahead. Moving figures, hurried whispers, the metallic clatter of chains. They slipped inside, Ben's pulse thundering. In the gloom, they spotted 3 masked men herding a group of frightened women, some barely conscious, others wild-eyed with terror, toward the exit at the far end. Ben motioned for Clara to hang back. He drew his weapon, heart pounding, and whispered to Echo, "Guard Clara." But Echo sensed more than Ben did. His ears pricked, and he surged forward, intercepting a man who had slipped behind them with a knife drawn. The attacker lunged at Clara. She stumbled, dropping her bag, but Echo launched himself at the man's legs, teeth bared, forcing him to the ground. The knife skittered across the floor. Clara scrambled back, breath sharp, as Echo stood over the subdued attacker, lips peeled in a silent snarl. Ben charged into the chaos, pinning a second assailant against the wall. The man fought back, wild and desperate, but Ben's training took over. He twisted the man's wrist, sending his weapon clattering away, and cuffed him with shaking hands. The third man tried to drag a screaming woman toward the exit, but Clara, emboldened, blocked his path, brandishing a flashlight like a weapon. "Let her go!" she shouted, voice ringing down the tunnel. The man hesitated just long enough for Ben to tackle him from behind. In the dust and noise, Echo circled back to Clara, nudging her gently as if to say, "I'm here." She pressed her forehead to his, tears shining in her eyes, gratitude and relief overwhelming the terror. As they gathered the rescued women, 7 in all, one of them, pale and trembling, grabbed Ben's arm. "He said they were waiting for a train," she whispered, "that we were leaving tonight, east with the others." She stared past him, eyes glassy, voice breaking. "They have more, in the cabin up the hill." Ben's mind sharpened. "Halverson," he said, and Clara nodded. "He's running tonight." Working quickly, Ben radioed Hoyt with their location and the number of victims. Then he and Clara hurried up the icy slope toward the old cabin, Echo at their heels, his limp nearly gone in the heat of pursuit. Moonlight glinted off broken glass in the cabin's windows. Inside, muffled cries and the shuffling of feet. They burst in, Ben leading, weapon raised, Clara behind with Echo bracing for anything. The scene was chaos, another group of women huddled and terrified. A man in a suit, Halverson shouted, trying to corral them. "Stay back," he roared, reaching for a pistol. Echo charged. In a blur of fur and muscle, he knocked the gun from Halverson's hand, sending it spinning under a cot. Ben lunged, pinning Halverson to the wall. "It's over," Ben growled. "You're done." Outside, red and blue lights slashed through the forest. Sheriff Hoyt and his deputies had arrived, securing the cabin and tunnel, helping the rescued women to safety. Clara wept as she hugged one of the survivors, the terror and relief spilling over at last. In the aftermath, as victims sobbed and deputies called in the feds, Clara collapsed against Ben's shoulder. Echo pressed tight between them. "We did it," she breathed, voice shaky but full of awe. Ben could only nod, watching as paramedics led the women, Emily not among them, but hope burning brighter now, into the waiting warmth of the patrol cars. In that moment, Clara's desperation gave way to something fierce and unbreakable. Echo nuzzled her hand, eyes shining with trust. They had cracked the darkness, shattered the web that had held Elkridge in fear. And as they watched the last train pass through the night, empty for once, Ben understood the next step was clear. Find Emily, bring everyone home. The next train wouldn't be an escape. It would be an ending, or a beginning. The wind howled over the south rail yard, tossing grit and snow across rows of freight cars. It was just past 3 a.m., the hour when nightmares either fade or sharpen. Ben Carter gripped the radio in the patrol truck, knuckles white as he checked his watch. Every instinct screamed that time was slipping away, that if they didn't move now, the darkness in Elkridge would disappear down the tracks for good. Clara sat beside him, her hands shaking as she scrolled through her phone, watching security cameras Sheriff Hoyt's team had managed to patch into. Faces flickered by in grainy footage, deputies searching the woods, EMTs tending to survivors. But what Clara watched for was one face, one girl, Emily. Echo paced the cab restlessly, nose pressed to the window, every muscle taut with anticipation. A burst of static. "We got movement by the old siding. Freight car 511, locked and guarded." Hoyt's voice crackled in. "We think they're loading up now." Ben slammed the truck into gear. "Let's move." They rushed across the frozen yard, boots crunching over packed snow, breaths painting clouds in the floodlights. The air tasted of diesel and fear. Echo ran ahead, undaunted, tracking every scent, every scuff in the frost. As they neared the siding, the scene exploded into motion. Men in dark coats, radios hissing, hauling struggling girls toward a heavy freight car. Daniel Halverson stood in the center, barking orders, his presence radiating control. 2 armed guards flanked the car, their eyes darting between the darkness and the approaching officers. Ben and Hoyt didn't wait for backup. "Go!" Ben shouted, and deputies surged from the shadows. Clara ducked low, skirting behind the loading platform, searching every face for Emily. Echo, body tense, spotted movement behind the freight car. A girl, her hands tied, pale hair catching in the wind. Emily. The chaos erupted. Halverson shouted, his guards drawing weapons. Ben's training kicked in. He ducked behind a stack of crates, firing a warning shot into the air. "Drop your weapons," he commanded, voice thunderous. One guard panicked, turning his gun on Ben. Echo, faster than thought, lunged at the man, slamming into his leg and knocking the pistol wide. The man went down hard. Echo's teeth clamped on his coat until Ben dragged him away and cuffed him. The second guard tried to pull Clara back, but she swung a heavy flashlight into his arm, breaking his grip, and rushed to the boxcar where the girls waited. Inside the car, fear and hope mixed. A half-dozen missing women, huddled and crying, including Emily. Clara reached for her sister, hands trembling. "Emily!" she cried. Emily collapsed into her arms, sobbing, barely able to speak. For a moment, the world fell away. Clara wrapped Emily in her coat, tears freezing on both their cheeks. "You're safe now. I've got you. I've got you." Outside, Halverson made a break for the tracks, but Ben sprinted after him, rage and exhaustion boiling together. Halverson turned, swinging at Ben with a crowbar. Ben dodged, grappling with him in the biting wind, fists and curses flying. For a moment, It seemed Halverson's brute strength might win, but Ben thought of Clara, of Emily, of every scar he carried. He caught Halverson's wrist, twisting it until the crowbar clattered to the ice. Sheriff Hoyt and his deputies arrived, pinning Halverson to the ground, reading him his rights. Ben sagged against a freight car, adrenaline fading, eyes on the horizon, as dawn pressed up behind the mountains. Paramedics wrapped the women in blankets. Emily clung to Clara, her voice hoarse. "I thought I'd never see you again." Clara wept, clutching her sister so tightly she shook. "I promised I'd find you. I never stopped looking." Echo nudged their hands, pressing close as if to bind them all together. The girls stroked his ears, whispering thanks and sobbing into his fur. Ben knelt beside them, exhaustion and relief warring in his chest. "You're safe now," he whispered, meeting Clara's gaze. "It's over." For the first time, Clara let herself believe it. Halverson was led away in cuffs, his empire crumbling as dawn swept over Elkridge. Reporters would later call it a miracle, a testament to courage and tenacity. But in the moment, it was just people, broken, battered, but not defeated, pulling each other out of the dark. Ben watched Clara and Emily, arms entwined, and saw the future glimmer there, a future built not on perfection, but on stubborn, unyielding love. Echo, panting, settled at their feet, scarred but proud, his eyes fixed on the new day. Around them the town stirred, neighbors arriving with coffee and blankets, survivors wrapped in the arms of loved ones. Tears and laughter mingled in the crisp air. The story of Elkridge would change that day, not because of one heroic act, but because so many people chose not to give up, because a wounded dog ran into the fog, and a community found the courage to follow. As the last train thundered past, empty but for echoes, Ben closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in hope. They had come to the edge and stepped back together. The days after the rescue moved slow and golden, sunlight painting Elkridge in a gentleness it hadn't felt for years. The rail yard, once a place of whispers and loss, stood transformed, echoing not with dread, but with laughter and hope. The townsfolk gathered again and again on the square, drawn by something deeper than curiosity, a need to bear witness to what healing looked like after so much darkness. Ben Carter, battered but steady, found himself at the center of it all. He shook hands, hugged tearful parents, and accepted every thanks with a humility that never left his eyes. But most days, he returned to Clara's porch in the late afternoon, where Echo napped in the sun and Emily braided wildflowers into her sister's hair. He tried to blend into the background, but it wasn't easy, not when gratitude and grief flowed so openly, knotting everyone together. Elkridge honored its wounded heroes on a Sunday, the town hall filled to bursting, old men in pressed uniforms, mothers with toddlers on their hips, teenagers who had grown up too fast. A banner hung from the rafters, "Thank you, Echo, Clara, Ben, and Emily, for bringing us home." The mayor, voice choked, recounted what had happened. Ben barely heard the words. Instead, he watched Echo, now wearing a new collar, silver tags clinking softly, sitting alert at his feet, head high but eyes always on Clara and Emily. There was a moment of silence for those who had not come home. Ben bowed his head, feeling the weight of their absence. He caught Emily's gaze across the aisle, her hand wrapped tight around Clara's. She nodded, as if to say, "I'm here and that's enough for now." When it came time to honor the living, the applause rose in waves. Echo was called to the front first. Ben knelt beside him as the mayor pinned a medal to the dog's collar, his voice shaking with emotion. For courage, for loyalty, and for saving lives when hope was almost lost. Children ran up to hug Echo, who endured it all with patient dignity, tail thumping quietly. Ben accepted a small plaque, for bravery and compassion, but he handed it to Emily as soon as the ceremony ended. "This is yours too," he said. "You didn't give up." Clara gave a brief speech, her voice soft but steady. "We are not healed overnight. But when you choose hope, when you show up for each other, that's when healing begins. We honor everyone who helped, who called, searched, prayed, didn't turn away. Echo showed us how to keep going, even with scars. I think we can all do the same." That afternoon, life began to return. The cafe reopened, serving hot coffee and cinnamon rolls on the house for anyone who'd helped with the rescue. Ben lingered by the window, watching as survivors gathered, young women clutching each other, parents gently touching their children's cheeks as if afraid they'd vanish. The warmth in the room was a balm, laughter returning, voices growing bold. Emily started volunteering at the animal clinic, working with Clara to comfort dogs and cats brought in from the countryside. She was quiet, eyes always scanning for trouble, but when she smiled, something fragile and new took root in the hearts of those who saw it. Ben, for his part, struggled with what came next. He'd always thought closure was something final, a door shutting. Instead, it felt like a door left open, a promise to remain vigilant and kind. The nightmares faded but never fully left. Sometimes, late at night, Ben would find himself wandering the train tracks, Echo at his side, replaying every step that had led them to this point. Each time, Echo nudged his hand, grounding him in the present. Clara poured her energy into something new, a trauma recovery center in the heart of town. She renovated an old house, filling it with sunlight, therapy dogs, art supplies, and quiet corners. Survivors came in waves, some ready to talk, others just wanting to sit and breathe. Echo became their unofficial greeter, his gentle presence easing fears better than any words could. At the grand opening, Clara spoke again, her voice full of gratitude. "We were all broken, in one way or another. But we learned that broken doesn't mean finished. Sometimes it means you're ready to help someone else heal." The room filled with nods and tears. Ben, Clara, Emily, and Echo became pillars in Elkridge, a living reminder that scars could be honored, that persistence was a kind of miracle. It was not about forgetting the pain, but about transforming it into something gentler, more useful. The way broken people and animals, scarred but not defeated, could bring hope to a place that needed it most. On one golden evening, Ben sat on the porch, watching the sun slip behind the pines. Clara and Emily laughed inside, Echo sprawled at his feet, eyes half closed. Ben closed his eyes, breathing in the clean air, letting gratitude settle into the cracks left by sorrow. Sometimes, he thought, miracles wore fur and walked with a limp. Sometimes healing began not with perfection, but with a stubborn refusal to give up. Spring arrived late in Elkridge that year, but when it came, it swept the valley in a rush of green and birdsong. Crocuses broke through patches of old snow, and the river ran fast and clear. Ben Carter found himself standing beneath the wide Montana sky, breathing in the cool air, the scent of thawed earth, and wood smoke curling from cabin chimneys. It was the kind of morning that made you believe in second chances. The whole town gathered in the square for a day of quiet celebration, a day not about heroics, but about endurance, gratitude, and the ordinary miracle of coming home. Tables lined with coffee, cakes, wildflower bouquets, and a quilt covered in stitched names. Survivors, helpers, those lost and those found. Parents whispered thanks, children darted between legs, laughter rising in the wind. Echo was everywhere, accepting hugs from children, lapping water from paper cups, soaking up every gentle hand that stroked his battered fur. His limp had softened, but never disappeared. He wore his new collar with the silver tag, Echo, hero of Elkridge, and seemed perfectly content to let the world celebrate around him. Emily, smiling more freely now, helped kids tie ribbons onto his leash, blue for hope, yellow for bravery. Clara stood on the makeshift stage, Emily at her side. Her gaze swept the crowd, her voice steady. This story isn't just ours. It belongs to Elkridge. It belongs to every person who searched, who hoped, who kept the porch light burning even when the nights were darkest. She reached for Emily's hand. We came close to losing each other, but you all brought us back. And you brought back pieces of yourselves, too. Trust, compassion, courage. The things that last. She gestured for Ben to join her. Ben, reluctant but smiling, stepped forward. The crowd quieted. He cleared his throat, the words coming slow, honest, shaped by months of struggle. Sometimes, the smallest acts, a dog's instinct, a neighbor's courage, tip the scales between life and loss. I don't think any of us really believed, deep down, that we could stop what was happening here. But Echo did. Clara did. Emily did. I learned from them that giving up is a choice, and so is hope. We don't always get to win or to fix what's broken, but we get to keep trying. We get to care. He glanced at Echo, who watched him with soft eyes, tail thumping against a child's shoe. This dog, he taught me that you can be scarred, you can limp, you can be lost and still be the bravest heart in the room. He never stopped looking for what was missing. He never stopped loving, even when the world didn't make sense. That's the story I want to share. A hush fell. The town listened, and Ben saw, in the sea of faces, the flicker of recognition, the way people saw themselves reflected in the struggle, the fear, the stubborn hope. He felt it in the squeeze of Emily's hand, the way Clara's shoulders relaxed at his words, the way Echo pressed close and gazed at the sky as if he too understood. Clara stepped forward again, voice trembling now. If this story moved you, please share it, with your family, with someone who needs hope, or with anyone who's lost faith in quiet heroism. These stories remind us that together, we can bring each other back from the edge. She paused, letting the words settle like spring rain. If you've witnessed small acts of heroism, or know someone who changed your life, share your story with our community. Let's remind each other that hope is real, and sometimes it has 4 legs and a heart full of courage. After the speeches, the celebration softened into something simpler. Shared food, old friends embracing, strangers offering shy smiles, survivors gathering in circles to talk. Echo wandered from group to group, occasionally lying down beside someone sitting alone, tail wagging, inviting connection. As the afternoon faded, Ben, Clara, Emily, and Echo made their way to a quiet hill just outside town, away from the crowd and noise. They sat together in the grass, watching clouds drift above snow-tipped peaks. Emily leaned her head on Clara's shoulder, her laughter light and new. Ben scratched Echo's ear, feeling the pulse of life beneath the old scars. No one spoke for a while. There was no need. The silence was full of gratitude. Each of them alive, together, changed but not broken. Ben broke the silence, his words soft. You know, I used to think stories like this ended with justice and a lesson. But I think the real ending is here. Us, on this hill, with all the messiness and all the love. We made it back. That's enough. Clara smiled. It is. Emily nodded, eyes bright. Echo rolled onto his back, paws in the air, sun on his belly, perfectly at peace. As dusk settled, the lights of Elkridge glowed below, a promise against the darkness. The story of the town, the story of a wounded deputy, a grieving sister, a lost girl, and a dog who wouldn't quit, lived on in every laugh, every embrace, every ordinary act of courage. And as they watched the stars come out one by one, Echo nestled between them, a living reminder that love and loyalty, no matter how battered, always endure. If this story touched you, please like and follow our channel. Share it with someone who needs hope. And remember, in every town, in every heart, there is a hero waiting to be found. Sometimes they even have 4 legs.